What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, January 28th, 2020, getting into the week here. A lot of stuff going on today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, observations, opinions, and so forth and so on. Anyway, getting right on into it, a little over an hour ago, as I was doing the prep for the show today, a powerful earthquake hit the floor of the Atlantic Ocean between Jamaica and Cuba, closer to Cuba, with 7.7 magnitude. That is some serious shaking going on. And apparently buildings as far away as Miami shook. People on the mainland were feeling that quake. And they're estimating that tsunamis from this quake will reach 3 feet high. Now, 3 feet high doesn't sound all that much until you realize that the shallower the water is, the taller the wave will grow. So we're looking at tsunamis that could easily flood the ground floor of a beachside house, and of course could prove inconvenient for the shipping traffic in the Caribbean area. So we'll keep an eye on that for aftershocks and so forth. But it does seem to be a time when there's a lot going on, where Mother Nature seems to be sort of like pushing back on us humans and saying, get off, until you can behave yourself. Which brings us to the coronavirus. There's been a lot of coverage of the coronavirus on the corporate media today, and it's still breaking down into two schools of thought. One, there's no big deal, and two, it's the end of the world, so buy vaccines and go to your particular house of worship and pray mightily. Now, one alarming story that has come on out is how Japan and Germany have confirmed they have patients of the coronavirus who did not visit China. However, in one case, for example, there's a bus driver who had driven tour groups in Japan who had come from Wuhan earlier this month. And we now know that this coronavirus, the Wuhan virus, they're calling it now, has been drifting around China since December 1st. Okay, so this is a clear case of secondary communicability, human-to-human transfer, and these two patients have now been hospitalized. Over in Hong Kong, there are now riots that have been triggered by the claim that the government plans to use public housing as quarantine facilities for coronavirus victims. And of course, that's making a lot of people very upset. Okay, let's grab ourselves a phone call from Dave in Delaware. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing okay.
Aloha. Nui nui.
We knew yourself. What can I do for you?
Hey, I wanted to talk about the helicopter crash with Kobe Bryant.
Yes.
Yeah, it something about it just doesn't sit right. Did you see how they had like a cartoon that they showed that he had crashed before and like died? Like they always predicted it, like predictive programming.
No, I missed that one. I mean, I've been paying attention to the NTSB reports about this, and it looks like this one definitely chalks up as pilot error because the pilot was out there in questionable weather in a helicopter, and he asked for and got what is called special VFR clearance, which says it's okay to fly in the clouds as long as you're sure you know where you're going and nobody else is in there.
Yeah, but he was also he was also certified with the IVFR, like with the infrared, the FLIR technology, and that helicopter was also part of that as well. It was a Sikorsky, I believe. And then they showed where he
okay.
had it painted.
Dave,
he had it painted.
Dave, why would a tourist helicopter have a FLIR system on board?
No, I didn't say that it was a tourist helicopter. You're saying that. I'm saying it was a Sikorsky. That's the model of the helicopter. And if you look it up, how it was painted blue and white, he bought it for, I believe, it was like he bought it from another like a state. They sold it off in like when they had a financial crisis, and then he had it painted black. And then if you look at the NTSB footage, the drone footage, the plane shows the original colors, the blue and white. But then, so what happens to all the like the paint? I guess the paint just burned off.
Could very well be that the paint just burned off here. And by the way, when you buy a Sikorsky helicopter, you're getting basically the frame, rotors, and controls. And you pick your own engine, you put it in there. You have this. You choose the avionics, and even though the Sikorsky has the fittings for a FLIR unit, doesn't mean that they had one. By the way, it wasn't painted black. It had a skin on it, which he used during his basketball career.
That's a good question. Exactly. That's true as well. So you think that all that, like, I guess that it was painted with a skin matte or something? They can, paint it with a skin. So then it all burned off? Did you
Yes.
watch any of the, or listen to any, like, the air traffic controller?
Yes, I did.
Like, conversations that happened, how, like, he was up there for, like, 15, 20 minutes, just, like, rotating in the air, just waiting to go to the next, air traffic control spot and all that. Did you hear any of that?
Waypoint. Waypoint is the word you're looking for. Well, basically, the air traffic control cleared him for special VFR. The NTSB says that may have been a bad decision, given the conditions of weather that they were in right now. In fact,
the
it may be.
NTSB said that might have been a bad decision. I didn't see that one.
No, I'm saying that may have been a bad decision to clear the helicopter for special
VFR.
VFR.
Confirmed that. Okay.
No,
Yeah,
the NTSB. Dave, my turn, my radio show.
Why?
The NTSB confirmed. Okay. Now, the NTSB confirmed that the pilot requested and was granted special VFR. Now, for those of you who are not pilots or who have not had pilot training, there are basically 3 sets of rules under which you fly. The first is VFR, which stands for Visual Flight Rules, which means you take off and you have to see where you're going and you get there. Then there is IFR, which is Instrument Flight Rules, where you are under the control of the ground controllers. And then there is Special VFR, which is kind of this world in between, where, under normal VFR, you have to stay so many thousand feet away from clouds so that you're not going to be surprised by somebody coming out the other side. But under Special VFR, with IFR guidance, you're allowed to fly through the clouds, and that's the condition the helicopter was flying in. And it looked like he was just trying to climb and climb, and the air traffic control tape basically indicates the ground controller saying, you're not high enough, you're not high enough, you're not high enough, and the data block vanishes from the radar. Anyway, we're going to go back to the phones here to Chance in West Virginia. Aloha, Chance. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. It's good to have you back, and I'm glad you're feeling a little better. Just an observation, Michael. We've got rumors of war, right? We've got earthquakes under the ocean. We've got vitamins and minerals depleted from our food supply, which is another word for pestilence. And we got a pandemic. Do you think the big boss man is trying to tell us something, Michael?
Well, for those people who believe in the big boss man, I could hardly fault them for thinking that's what's going on here, because, I mean, there's even more than you described going on. There was a big quake, I think, in, what was it, Afghanistan just a few days ago. And so, yeah, it's definitely a time when Mother Nature is definitely rocking and rolling.
Yeah, it's just something to think about. I find it awfully coincidental. Okay, Michael, glad to have you back now. Goodbye.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And let's see, our controller, Michael, is out there saying he thinks the flu outbreak in China ought to be called the Kung flu. Maybe. Anyway, getting on back to the serious side of the story. Time magazine ran an article saying that the Wuhan coronavirus infections could be as much as 30 times higher than the official total. Well, there's a fear-mongering headline article for you. I mean, how would Time magazine know one way or the other? So that's one side of the story. You know, it's the end of the world, and, you know, we're all doomed, and go out and buy vaccines and max out the credit cards and so forth and so on. But we went through this with swine flu, bird flu, SARS, that one time when 4 people had Ebola, and the corporate media just, we're on the verge of another planet-wide outbreak. And now they're doing the same thing with the coronavirus. And it makes it really rather hard to get excited about what's going on. And at the same time, it raises a rather interesting question, because what happens after all these hyped stories when there's a real outbreak and the government needs the people to come together to deal with a true outbreak? And the people are saying, oh, fool me once, shame on you. And they basically stay home. That's a real risk that they're running. What if this is real? And nobody wants to take any precautionary measures. Resulting death toll is going to be far, far worse because of all the times we have been lied to about previous supposed planet-ending outbreaks. The people who are putting out the propaganda, they really don't think what the long-term costs of what they're doing are going to be. They're getting their little paychecks, they're getting their Porsches, they're getting their weekends and holiday places, and they get to drive around and look really cool and have a lot of fun. But they're not really thinking about what is this doing to the minds of our population, and how is it going to alter their perception of future news. Anyway, just something for you to think about. Now, Paul Craig Roberts, who I normally have a lot of regard for, he's out there suggesting, hinting rather strongly, that the Wuhan virus is an engineered or weaponized virus let loose from Chinese labs. Well, we cannot rule out the possibility that any of these pathogens are biological weapons. Biological weapons are favored by a lot of countries. But why would China release it on its own people unless somebody just got careless at that BSL-4 lab in Wuhan and dropped a test tube? There's another possibility, and that is that this is an engineered virus introduced into China by a third party to disrupt their economy. And already we're hearing where economic forecasts for China, especially in that part of China, are already plunging down. It shook up the stock market for a few days. It rebounded today. But if you stipulate the possibility of an engineered virus, you can't confine it to only being China. China's got a lot of enemies, including here in the United States of America. All righty, story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Both China and the world economy are being impacted by the coronavirus, by the Wuhan virus. And yeah, nobody is really gaining from this just yet. And I sat through the CDC news conference earlier this morning, where they basically came out with some information. First of all, nobody has a vaccine yet to sell you the Wuhan virus, but they're working on one and could be ready as early as 3 months from now. Ooh, boy. They're finally starting to get some hard data on the Wuhan virus. They've determined so far that its R0 factor lies somewhere between 1.5 and 3.5. And I realize that's a very wide spread, and people are saying, what does that really mean? Well, the R0 is the average or estimated number of secondary infections that will occur from one infected individual. And to give you an idea of the perspective, 1.5 to 3.5 is a range normal for most influenza, as compared to like measles, which has an R0 of 18. So that gives you an idea of this earlier claim that 86% of people who get exposed are going to come down with the illness. That number now seems a little bit high in the face of an R0 of just 3.5. So there we are on that. So, they're talking about, and in a way, I keep talking about this movie called Contagion, which I'm sure somebody's going to rush into the program schedule really quick in the next few days. And except for the part where they demonize bloggers and blogging, it is an interesting movie to watch, and there is some science in there. But watching the press conference today, it was like scenes right out of that movie about how they're handling the situation. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here, and we're going to go to Thomas in Toledo. Aloha, Thomas. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hey, Mike. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the plane crash in Afghanistan.
Okay.
Did you see how they confirmed that there was only 2 people on board? It was like, I guess, the pilot and co-pilot?
Well, that seems like a horrible waste given the complexities of the aircraft. But I mean, the number keeps changing. I mean, you have, first of all, they said it was less than 10 on an aircraft that can carry as many as 30 people. Less than 10, then they said less than 5. Now they're saying just 2. And frankly, anything that's coming out of the Pentagon, I wouldn't take at face value anyway.
I know, right? So hold on. And that plane, it almost reminds you of, what was the name of the planes that they used to use to bring heroin outside of Vietnam? Air Express?
Air America.
Air America, there you go. Yeah, that's crazy, though.
This airplane had Air Force livery on it. It was fully marked aircraft. What the suggestion is that it was actually a CIA airborne command and control post, one of the most sophisticated that the U.S. has produced. And of course, now all that documentation and the surviving hardware is in the hands of the Taliban.
Yeah, but they showed where the Taliban let the American investigators get through right away.
Yes.
And they let them investigate the plane right away. The Taliban let the American investigators get through right away to investigate the scene. What do you make of that?
Well, the allegiances seem to be changing in Afghanistan. I mean, originally, the Taliban obviously were the enemy. Now the Afghan government is the enemy, and the Taliban have become our allies again. But I understand that the Americans did remove at least the remains of the dead who were still on board. As far as how much of the equipment they could salvage from that aircraft. I'm sorry?
They removed what was still on board?
I said the remains of any passengers who were still on board, any victims of the crash. I mean, we don't know if the plane got torn open in midair and stuff fell out. In any event, the bottom line is to remove all of that classified equipment, short of just throwing a thermite grenade in there and setting it all on fire. It's going to take more than a day to do that.
Oh, okay, I get it. Because, they were saying that the top of it looked all burned out, like it wasn't even shot down. It was just like placed there on the ground or something like that. Hey, did you see any of the remains of the people from the plane that was shot down in Iran the other day after Trump did his fake?
No, I did not.
I didn't see any remains of any of the people on those planes. Did you? They had a bunch of people walking around. They had a bunch of people walking around with empty body bags, and and then everybody just moved on to the next subject. I mean, I don't know. Some of this stuff doesn't make sense. I mean, what do you think, Mike? Do you really believe that Kobe Bryant crashed into a hill? And then do you know the hill that he was flying on his helicopter was right behind Kim Kardashian's house? What sense do you make of that?
Well, I don't think I don't make any sense of it at all. I don't think Kim Kardashian and Kobe Bryant had any kind of animosity towards each other. I think this was flat out pilot error, and long-time listeners will understand. I sort of go for Occam's razor in trying to solve all these things. The simplest, most straightforward explanation is most likely the truth.
Key bono, right?
No, Key bono and Occam's razor are two completely different things. And I look for the simplest possible explanation. And if that doesn't make sense, then I start saying, okay, there's something suspicious here. Then key bono comes into play.
Oh, I get it. Okay. That makes sense, Mike. I mean, okay, that's cool. But I'm saying, though, there's a lot of this stuff that's going on out here, man, that you're not talking about. And you're kind of obfuscating everything. And then you're going to kind of push again.
Okay, Thomas, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercial. Yeah, I'll hold you over, okay? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're finishing up here with Thomas and Toledo. And Thomas, to sort of summarize what I was saying before, generally, when I look at a new situation, the first thing I look for is the simplest possible explanation. And if that explanation makes sense and fits all the available facts, I basically kind of stop there. And in the case of Kobe Bryant, the indicators are the pilot was trying to fly over some clouds, misjudged his altitude, crashed into the hillside. And at which point, the fact that he was near Kim Kardashian places or anywhere else becomes totally irrelevant, because Calabasas is another one of the areas where the celebrities like to sort of maintain their privacy. It's sort of an inland Malibu beach.
Mike,
okay?
Mike, I know it's Mike.
Yes.
I know it's your show, but I'm a caller. We make your shows. Can I have a point that I'm going to make or say something?
1 point.
Oh, only one? No, I said something about you obfuscating. But, hey, look. If you really believe that the pilot did all that stuff that you just said, do you even know his name?
Do you know how many pilots make mistakes?
You're not answering my question. Do you know
No,
the
you're not
pilot
answering
you
my
made?
question. Hang on a second, okay? Pilots make mistakes. Your entire thesis about Kim Kardashian. Pilots make mistakes. This appears to be one of them. Okay? So
I know they
in any
do.
event, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mr. Mike. Good to hear you. This coronavirus, I agree with Paul Craig Roberts to a point. I kind of agree with you that this was, I don't think it was let out intentionally. I do think it's a weapon, and
No.
I do think it was, I don't think it was let out intentional. But what you have to remember here in the past, too, look at SARS, look at MERS, and this was all hyped up to push a vaccine, and only a few hundred people died. But the World Health Organization isn't even, they're sitting on their hands with this one. Where's the Surgeon General out of this country? We don't even have one. There's not even a Surgeon General in this country. You have the West Coast that is completely not, like this virus isn't even contained. They're not even stopping the flow of fentanyl from China here. Do you really think they're going to stop the flow of Chinese immigrants to here too? I mean, our borders are so porous, it's not even funny. I mean, I guess we're all racist against the coronavirus, if they really want to go that route. But I do feel this was one of those weapons that they've been working on, and it hasn't been perfected. I don't think this was the quote-unquote big one, but I did think that this something is up with this. And remember, months ago, Bill and Melinda Gates with the NIH and as well as John Hopkins ran a simulation, and there's also a video or a Netflix documentary or something called Pandemic, or I think it's called Pandemic or Pan something, and it was created by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation too. So this timing of everything, it just seems real suspicious. People be aware. This may get out of hand. I don't know. I'm not trying to raise an alarm or anything, but I am a little concerned.
Well, I'm a little concerned as well. It does seem rather potent as a biological weapon. It does seem to have issues complicating its secondary communicability in that, according to some articles, it seems to favor infecting certain types of Chinese people. Now, remember, China was originally formed out of, I think it was 7 different regions with 7 different ethnic groups. And we know that China is dealing with their own population problems, and this may be part of what they're working on. Or again, this may be simply developing a biological weapon. Remember, China's only known BSL-4 biolab, which is where you'd be developing something like this, was in Wuhan, which raises the possibility that somebody dropped a beaker by mistake. And of course, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the third possibility is this is a biological weapon developed in another country entirely and simply deployed against the Chinese in Wuhan in order to lay a false trail to that BSL-4 lab, or at least to make it unavailable for research and detection.
Sure. I mean, you said third party possibility. when you say that, I think of the international banking cartel. I absolutely believe they have the ability to pull something like this off. Absolutely. I mean, and think, how well is the Chinese markets tied to the American markets? I know you said they rebounded, but we've only seen the beginning of this.
Yes. No, there's a lot of countries, a lot of business interests would like to see China knocked down, and China's already rolling back their economic forecast for the rest of the year based on this outbreak. So, wouldn't be the first time that biological means were used to secure a business advantage. There was all the crop poisonings in South America by the CIA in order to favor American food corporations. So we've seen this before, and it's a possibility. We don't know exactly what happened, but it is a possibility. Anyway, listen, Kevin, got to let you go. Got another phone call waiting. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go right back to the phones to Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, just to tell Kevin that movie he was thinking about beginning with it's Pandemic, name of the movie.
Yes.
But I think all your theories are very relevant on the coronavirus. But as I stated yesterday, I don't believe this is real. I believe this is a diversion story. This is fear, panic. It's what it is. It's a diversion. And if it was really serious, it was really seriously deadly, as they say it is, then they would stop all incoming flights from China and divert it back or refuel it. Nobody would deplane. So this is a fraud. I'll believe it. I'll believe this, Mike. It's deadly when the first politician dies from it. I'll believe it, then it's true. Other than that, I don't think that's going to happen because those guys are going to make sure they get back in office. But there's an island in New York, off of New York, their coast there. It's called Plum Island. And anybody's interested in reading a book called Lab 257, What is Going On Plum Island, what our government is working hard on, not finding cures, that's for sure, but biological weapons. And this could be a biological weapon, but I've been getting a lot of emails lately after I spoke last night on John's show about it, and my theory stands. I think it's a fraud. It's just a diversion story. But if you have a normal, healthy, pretty much healthy immune system, and if you can handle the flu, you'll be able to handle this. So just keep continuing healthy practices, nutrition, diet, everything you can think of that you should be doing anyway. Washing hands, all those things, hydration, electrolytes, all that stuff. You're going to be fine. If you have secondary problems, if you have underlying health problems, well, and if the flu gets you down really bad, well, that's the flu can do that if your immune system's compromised already. And a lot of times what we see are these stories that are being jacked up to saying, oh, we got another death from the flu, but forgetting to tell you there's underlying health problems with this person. He had this going on. And that's simply, the flu simply pushed him over the edge. But he was vulnerable from the very beginning. Nobody talks about that because that hurts the numbers. You see, they drive the numbers up, say it's the flu, people want to get the vaccine, and the vaccine people, the pharmaceuticals love that. Stock goes through the roof. So that's something to keep in mind there. I don't believe it, and also always look to who funds these research projects and all the evidence that you're seeing. There's a lot of pseudoscience out there, a ton of pseudoscience out there. So look what you're looking at. Hey, my question today was regarding the impeachment trial in the Senate, the two charges for articles of impeachment. Now, we go over to the House. Those are hearings, not a trial, but those are hearings, but it was very biased. They already had guilty in their minds all the way. It was ridiculous that whole week. So they march over the two articles of impeachment 1 month later, and the Senate now has a trial. Now, saying hearings from trial, now we are looking at following the rule of law. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so Donald Trump has every right to face his accuser. His name is Eric Ciaramella. He has every right to face his accuser, and if they don't come forward with the ability for him to question his accuser, this thing should be thrown out, completely just thrown out. It stops. It's dead in the water. Because if we're talking rule of law now, you can't convict somebody. You can't send them up the river if you can't question the people that accuse you of what you said you've done wrong. So this is a farce. If they do not allow this, if he doesn't want to testify, then I think they should throw this thing out immediately, not even waste their time on it.
Well, I absolutely agree. And of course, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is presiding over the Senate trial, which really gets underway tomorrow when the senators start asking their questions. But at this point, I mean, certainly public opinion has turned against this whole impeachment scam. President Trump's numbers keep going up. The galleries are actually empty. People are, I mean, the ratings for these hearings and trial hearings and testimony keep going down. Now, the bad side of that is if people are not watching the actual testimonies and statements being made, then they're more and more dependent. If they're even curious at all, they may not even be that curious, but if they're curious at all, they're more dependent on the corporate media's interpretation and spin of what was said rather than what actually happened on the floor of the Senate. But at this point, to me, it looks like in the court of public opinion, Trump is definitely winning this.
Yeah. Oh, well, last thing I want to mention is this Bolton memoir. I'm not sure if it's still a memoir. It's actually a book now. I believe the title was always chosen, Conversation in the Room. So, sour grapes, John Bolton is fired, and now they want him to testify, which is very, very strange because he immediately started writing this book, evidently, after being terminated, fired. So now I kind of wonder, it has to pass clearance, first of all, because he's government. So somebody had to read this book, say yes or no, or cross out or do the highlighter thing, Sharpie it out. Or unless we're talking about rogue intelligence or the proofreaders are rogue and they allow it to go through, which now could be maybe damning evidence against Donald Trump. I'm very suspicious of Bolton writing this immediately.
I am too.
And being able to be called as a witness and that this book, well, it could be very interesting. I mean, well, you're talking about sour grapes, and now you got a guy who maybe, if you can write it and you can say hearsay, but you got nothing to back it up. I mean, we're looking at some dangerous territory of convicting people on hearsay with showing no true evidence of a crime being committed. I'm not a big Trump fan. Don't get me wrong. I don't like the guy at all. I think abuse of power. He could be convicted of abuse of power, but not in the situation with Ukraine. I say abuse of power in what he's doing with starting wars all over the world, and he calls them conflicts, but they're actually wars. But I would say
Yes.
That's the abuse of power we're looking at. But this here with Ukraine, it's not abuse of power. That's simply doing something that benefits U.S. foreign policy, which Obama did and every president's always done. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. It all works that way. That's foreign policy. And if that's wrong, well,
Yeah.
then everybody in the past has been doing it all wrong also.
You're absolutely correct on that. And but again, the goal of the Democrats is not to actually remove Donald Trump, but merely to tarnish him going into the election season. I mean, next Monday are the first Iowa caucuses, and we'll get a sense from that whether this is really having the effect the Democrats want it to have or not. But right now, the polls are showing Sanders is leading Biden by a fairly decent margin, and that may indicate that people are really looking at this Burisma scandal and saying, yeah, there was corruption going on with Ukraine. It did involve the Biden family, and Donald Trump was well within his authority as president and within the agreement with the Ukrainian government to be investigating this and to ask for Ukraine to help investigate it. Now, the big question comes on down to, did he specifically name Joe Biden or not? And again, going back to John Bolton's book, we have, basically a guy wrote a book out of his memories, out of his diary entries, whatever. It's being published. The New York Times excerpted it and published the excerpts. And on the basis of the excerpts of a still unpublished book, the Democrats in Congress have gone on in and said, well, we have to have witnesses now. We've got to have John Bolton. And of course, the uphill fight for them is that they want only their chosen witnesses to be allowed to testify before the Senate and not anybody else. So understandably, as Ted Cruz is out there saying, let's get Hunter Biden on the stand, get him under oath, and the Democrats are screaming, it's irrelevant, it's irrelevant, it's irrelevant. And apparently the Democrats are taking the opinion that even if Biden and Hunter were neck deep in Ukrainian corruption, it's irrelevant to the idea that Donald Trump may have asked Putin for some assistance in investigating them, because it just had to be all about politics.
Right. Well, here's a scenario we could see. Actually, Bolton would testify, and Joe Biden wouldn't testify, he would say, I'm exercising my executive privilege as I was under in the Obama administration. So he would be guaranteed that. He couldn't reveal what he was doing, what they were all working on, so that's executive privilege for him. And Hunter Biden would plead the Fifth Amendment. So, so you have Bolton testifying, which could possibly bring down Trump, and you got two other people said I have executive privilege, and the other one says I have the Fifth. That could be interesting.
Well, I am thinking that if Hunter Biden was offered an immunity deal, then he can no longer invoke the Fifth.
That's true.
If he refuses to testify, he can go to jail.
Interesting. That's it for me, Mike. Have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I know who got Bolton's book through the National Security Council. That was Vindman's twin brother. Remember that guy, Vindman? That was
Yes.
the Army guy?
Yeah. Alexander Vindman, and he's got a twin brother.
Yeah, yeah. He got he basically proofread the book through. I mean, what a scam this whole thing is. This, if you think about it, my God, look at what's going on. Like, I mean, it's just, oh my God, it's like oligarchy, Mike, oligarchy. This is all oligarchy, you know? Some people call it, a plutocracy, but it's a small group of people. But I just keep going back to John Bolton, who he is, and he gets fired, supposedly, and then he writes a book, he makes a bundle. I'm not buying his book, so he's not going to make no money off me.
No, I'm not buying his book either. I was going to say, I don't know how much of a bundle he expects to make here. I mean, certainly he got a publisher's advance, which is another form of political payoff that's considered legal and neat and clean. But I remember when Hillary Clinton came out with It Takes a Village, and, you know, there was a big deal. She won a Grammy for it, and they were out there hyping and promoting this thing. And then 6 months later, it was in the manager's closeout bin for 50 cents a copy.
And still, to this day, no infrastructure bill. I remember they were just talking about we're going to get a middle-class tax cut. There ain't no talk about that now. You know?
Oh, yeah. Between now and tax deadline day, I mean, you know, people are going to be finding out that tax bill wasn't what they thought it was going to be.
And, Mike, I wanted to switch to Trump with Netanyahu. Man, Netanyahu is laying it on Trump, huh? It's like, he goes, Mr. President, Donald. He must have said that a couple times. Donald Trump said Israel so many times, my head spun around like Linda Blair.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and when he showed, did you see the map he showed? I mean, that used to all be called Palestine, you know, at one time.
Yes.
You know, and you look at and then the Jordan Valley, isn't that like where they need the water?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
No, this was a complete giveaway to Israel, and I'm not surprised that the Palestinian leadership has unanimously said this is a non-starter. It's dead on arrival. You know, we're going to give a whole bunch of stuff to Israel right now, and then somewhere down the road, Israel will do something nice for Palestine. And the Palestinians have heard that way too many times before.
Yeah, they're going to get the short end of the stick. I mean, Jared Kushner wrote this, right? Like
Yes.
I mean, and then Mike, real quick, I want to switch to China. Yeah, I don't think this was a bioweapon. I mean, if it is, it's not really doing a good job. If it's like Captain Trips from the movie The Stand, you know, it's like this thing started December 1st. So December 1st to now, you have a lot of air travel between now and then, right? And you would think, you know, if it was really as potent. More. Even though you come down with it like the flu, doesn't mean it's like Steve Elkin says. It has to do with your immune system and how old you are, you know. And it's just not a very good bioweapon if it is, you know. Like you would think, because remember, Wuhan is a transport hub. You wanted to shut it.
Yes.
It's shut down, but there's still goods and services moving around. People are still going to work in China. Not as many, but there's still things going on, you know. There's still people coming and going and all that. So, I mean, it's just like, that's why they got those flu sensors when you go to the airport. they check your temperature and all this other stuff. But I mean, I think it's overblown. You know, they're saying it's less than SARS. I mean, it is the flu and people are dying, but you know, don't go what there's. You know, it's an exaggeration of stuff. And they didn't start from a bat supposedly, or they people in the remote outposts of China and a lot of other countries that don't have refrigeration and stuff, they still eat off the land. They eat off the land here. You know, people eat deer and stuff, so you can get sick from eating the deer that's infected with something. So I mean, these things do happen, and you know, but everybody's not throwing out it's a bioweapon, you know. And there was a report 100,000 people are dead. There's bodies all over the place. That wasn't a true story.
No, that's fake news.
Yeah, that's fake news. But some people believe in. You get people all riled up. You know, so I mean, because I saw some of the like people in Australia, some people are recovering. You know, if it was like if they weren't recovering, you'd have to worry. Like if it had a 90% death rate or something, but it doesn't. You know, because I saw it's like 100.
The latest number is 15%. If you come down with this illness, 15% of the people will die from it, which again, as you said, as a biological weapon, it's very ineffective unless the intention of the biological weapon is to disable rather than to kill.
Which the people who were on Wall Street, Wall Street sunk down, but like you said, it recovered. So I don't see why they would do that in favor of Wall Street. If it was really bad, Wall Street would never recover, right? Because there'd be nobody out there purchasing anything at that point, right? Everybody would be dropping dead in the street. Yeah, so I think it's just overhyped, and you know, it'll probably blow over in the next few months. You know, like SARS did. You know, remember the hoof and the foot disease in Britain? That was like years ago.
Hoof and mouth.
Yeah,
hoof and mouth.
I mean, somebody could have come along and say that was a bioweapon, you know, but that was, you know, it's a virus. It's a disease, people. I mean, people get the flu people are going to die of the flu, like Steve Elkins also said yesterday. More people will die of the flu this year than of this, even though this is kind of like the flu, right?
Well, it is a form of flu, but flu is kind of a generic term. And in this case, when you're dealing with the coronavirus, you're dealing with a retrovirus, which is much more similar to, like, for example, Marburg or Ebola.
It's just, I feel bad for the people who are obviously dying or getting sick and having to go through, you know, but like I said, I've seen reports where the people are recovering already. So, all right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to the Cash Man in Indiana. Oh, no, wait, actually, we got to take a break for commercials. Cash Man, stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Let's go back to the phones to Cash Man in Indiana. And take it away, Cash. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This is the Cash Man and Tina Cash from Northwest Indiana. We just called to hear that we missed you. We were kind of worried about you. I didn't think that you moving from Hawaii to Indiana would upset you so bad that it would almost kill you.
Well, it's turned out now that I was dealing with this while I was still in Hawaii, so I would have gone through this regardless of where I was. Being in Indiana complicated things a little bit more, but we seem to be coming out, as they say, the backside of this thing. And, you know, maximum 2 weeks, I'll be back home doing this broadcast from my home studio from a much more comfortable chair than they have provided for me here. And
we're just happy, Mike, that you're okay. We were worried about you there for a while.
Well, thank you. And, you know, a lot of people were. I got tons and tons of email. I mean, thousands of pieces of email from people who were concerned about, you know, my health and my coming back. But I'm here. I'm back. I'm ready to take on Hillary Clinton if she dares step into the Democratic race this election season. And so we're good to go.
Mike, I just had a thing with the corona disease that's out there. About 3 or 4 years ago at my job in Northwest Indiana up here, I was going to get blood. and it was for the American Red Cross, but they said I couldn't get blood because I served in the military in Germany in the early 80s, and they were worried about the mad cow disease. And they said I couldn't get blood.
Yes.
So I found that kind of strange, but I guess if they found a cure for mad cow, I don't know, or they have it under control, because I found that kind of bizarre for me not able to get blood just because I served over in Germany in the 80s. That was quite a few decades ago, and how that would affect my blood now. It was kind of strange.
Well, it's funny you should mention mad cow, because when our earlier caller was talking about you can get ill from eating deer in this country, and that was the first thing that leapt to mind, is that mad cow had made the leap over to mad deer, and then all of a sudden it just kind of went away, and we've not heard about it ever since. Did it just sort of fade out by itself? Some illnesses will. Was it hyped right from the beginning to reshape the beef market? And, at this point, I hate to be descending into cynicism even more than I already have. But again, we've heard these things so many times, and there'll be a big, big media splash about mad cow or mad deer or SARS or MERS or whatever it is. And then 6 months down the road, it's completely gone. It's like, the one they had in 2009, the when pigs fly flu, that was supposed to be a flu made up of human, bird, and pig DNA. Sort of, the mind boggles imagining how that could come about, between, I don't know.
Genetically, I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. It's like some desperately lonely farmers kissing a bird and, doing it to a pig all at the same time or something. I don't know, but a little leery. Meanwhile, we find out that the CDC and USAMRIID are artificially creating such hybrid viruses as potential weapons.
Right.
Anyway, Cash, do you have anything more?
We just called to check. We just called to check, and we're happy that you're okay, and we'll be calling you again, Mike. Take care and say hi to Claire for us.
I certainly will. Thank you very much. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with hour 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go to Robert in New Jersey. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. How are you? I'm glad you're feeling better, and welcome back. I was involved in the industry of the life sciences for quite some time, and I was also one who was very skeptical and cynical of many, many things. I think one thing we have to look at with the current coronavirus is the larger picture, not simply focus on how dangerous it may be, et cetera, et cetera. Coronavirus causes a common cold in many different ways, so many of us have already had the coronavirus. Back in going back.
Well, hang on. We need to back up here a little bit. Coronavirus is now a broad label that covers several other more specific viruses like SARS and MERS and now Wuhan.
Correct. There's several different grades of it. I don't have them all in front of me, but it's on the CDC's main page. And they mention all the different ones, and they say everyone probably has come down with a coronavirus sometime in their life. Be that as it may.
Yes.
Step back to mad cow disease. Again, as I say, you have to look at the big picture. Maggie Thatcher was replaced by John Majors because Maggie wouldn't go with the euro. There was an overabundance of cattle in Europe. So out came mad cow disease. I got deeply involved in the investigation of this. I even went to Gajusek, who was the expert on Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. He said there was no connection between the mad cow and I can't remember all of the facts about it. However, he changed that when he got looked at by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for pedophilia, and he changed his mind. Then they dropped the charge. Okay, that was one. It still didn't get the British to go to the euro. So along came open mouth disease, and they had the big scare on that. You had to walk through a disinfectant with your shoes. Well, anyone that knows mad cow disease knows that if you come in contact with it, you carry the antigen in your lungs for 2 weeks. So that was a farce. Along came SARS. Now, SARS, I won't go into everything about it and behind it. However, it's get the people to get the inoculation. SARS was being reported for each and every case that was similar in effect. That came out from a researcher in Canada. So SARS was another farce. Now we have coronavirus. Chinese have a problem with Hong Kong. The Chinese have a problem with the trade policy. The Chinese economy is not going so well. A lot of these things are all factors. I look at the pictures that they put up. Pictures put up by CBS News on January the 5th of people with light clothing walking around in Wuhan with masks on. And I checked the weather. It was 39 degrees and raining. That was not a picture from them. There's been others who leave. That's not the wintertime in Wuhan. I checked the flight schedule. No planes were canceled. No flights out of Wuhan. Yet, they're going to check people going into airports to leave for fever. Well, you carry it for 2 weeks. Show the symptoms. Now, the other fact is the FEMA immediately approached the White House and wants to declare martial law. With the martial law, they want to take the gun from all Americans, this is closed, so that we can't fight mandatory vaccination. So I think we have to take a step back and look at this. I haven't even gone into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding Pirbright in Britain, which is the patent on the coronavirus. They're working on a vaccine. Now, when you develop a vaccine, the only thing you have to do is to show that it produces antibodies to the virus or to whatever disease you're working on. You don't test it in humans. So it's tested on humans. You're the guinea pig. And Bill Gates is a great one in believing that vaccinations will bring down the population, either making you sterile or killing you. This is the factors that have to be looked at. The other factor was the Event 201 was hosted by Johns Hopkins in New York City. It was also Bill and Melinda Gates, and the WHO was behind it, predicting that 65 million people would die from a coronavirus. That was October the 18th of last year. Coincidence. If you look at what was said in those if you can find it, Event 201 on the internet, many of today's news, clips will sound just like what was done during that simulation. So I think we have to take a step back and say, wait a minute. I'm not going to fall for all the hype. Yes, we have to take precautions. But when I see people flying out of airports in China and they have their temperature taken, that doesn't mean anything. If they've got it, well, are they going to let them fly or put them back there? If they don't have it, but they have the symptoms, no symptoms, but they're carrying it, they're only going to spread it. So anyway,
that's true.
That's all I have
the
to
incubation,
say.
The incubation period is estimated between 2 and 14 days. And you're right. There's a lot of theatricality going on here. Supposedly, Hong Kong Disneyland has shut their doors. A lot of fast food restaurants have shut their doors, places where people will congregate. So assuming that all of these news reports are true, which is, again, that's a bit of a reach, I'm beginning to side with those who think that this story is being hyped and overblown to conceal some other agenda, whether it's to market more medical products or I noticed they made a point of saying that the face masks that everybody has been stocking up on, the N95s, are useless against the Wuhan virus, that you've got to have masks that cover the eyes. So there's a whole new marketplace opening up for safety masks that cover the eyes.
One of the conclusions that they came out of the Event 201 was that it would facilitate the globalization and the New World Order of all governments cooperating as a single organization. In essence, governments, corporations, businesses, banks, etc. So that was the big conclusion, that we all have to get together in one big happy family and beat this. So I think that's
they were pushing that back in 2009. More than 10 years ago, they were pushing that same idea.
Yeah, Chossudovsky posted an article referring to his old 2009 on the SARS virus, the H1N1. You can find that in globalresearch.ca. And that's all I have to say, Mike. But, all right, I'll listen to your comments. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Like I said, there's a lot of information, disinformation, a lot of deliberate muddying of the waters being thrown out there regarding this outbreak. And of course, everybody's looking at it. How do I make money off of this? How do I use it to sell more of my face masks? How do I use it to sell more of my special magic curing healing incense or whatever? Anyway, we're going to go back to the phones to David at Crucial Nonsense. Aloha, David. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thanks for having me on. Definitely missed you while you were gone. Glad to have you back in the saddle. I wanted to respond to some caller comments here over the last couple of days. First of all, we'll go to Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, I like your idea about making that 800 number permanent on the video screen. That was actually just kind of a placeholder. I didn't actually intend that to be a permanent measure. We didn't anticipate having to be on reduced bandwidth and do this stuff, so that kind of works out good. So thank you for that. And if anybody else has any comments like that, I'm definitely interested to hear them so we can improve what we're doing here. Okay, now to address the rest of what you said and a bunch of other folks, everybody, of course, myself included, really miss Michael being on here doing this show and being able to bring the viewpoints of all the callers on here, because you guys have got some great ideas and some great analysis. You guys are paying attention. Mike has told all of us for the very long time we've done this show that you are the best analyst for yourself. You should be looking at all this stuff, taking all of the things we give you here and make up your own mind. And Dustin and the rest of you, you bring a lot of very valuable points to the show, and you have a voice, and you've been speaking out on that. And you say that you don't know what to do when we're not here to do the show, but you do. You do such a good job, bringing your voice on the air. And at some point, not anytime soon, hopefully, but at some point, we're going to, move on from here, and we're going to need people to pick up the torch and continue. The Rivero's Rangers, having your own shows and being able to put this information out and have people consider it and be able to interface with the callers, just like we're doing here, because that's a very, very valuable part of this show. We wouldn't be able to do all of this and have such an impactful program without the various opinions, because we've got a chorus of voices here of real people, not just talking heads on the TV, but real people on the ground that are living these lives and dealing with these things. And I can't say how much that I appreciate all that, because I like to hear what's on your mind. We don't always agree, but that's only a natural thing. And having this polite debate and discourse, discussing these informational points that you're bringing up respectfully amongst each other, this is how we come to, understanding amongst each other. We can work together. We don't have to fall into this extremism that's being, right or left, and you can't agree, on one thing. You can't work together at all. No, we need to be able to put some of these differences aside and go to the core of these issues. And remember always, Occam's razor, because that almost always applies. Sometimes it gets a little bit more complicated than that, but generally speaking, not. And that's where we start. Sometimes there's a little bit more, but as many things as we have to deal with here, if we're only getting 95% accuracy by going down the Occam's razor path, I say we're doing pretty good. That's an A grade still in this particular day.
Well, thank you very much for all the kind words, first of all, about our show. And you're absolutely right. I'm going to continue doing this for as long as I can. But as this second recent trip to the hospital has illustrated, as long as I can is not as long as I would like. And at some point, we're going to have to look at having other people step on in and start to fulfill certain roles within what really happened, or Rivero's Rangers, or whatever we're going to call it. And, it's going to be hard to let go, but at some point I'm going to have to. And if this, in fact, has any value whatsoever to our society, to the truth movement, it'll take off and persist on its own, carried forward by ordinary people like you and I and David and Mike, and again, not being interfered with by the giant corporate media.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does have a lot of value. I think that what we've been doing here for the past decades has had an impact. I think we've really slowed it down. We've been a big, giant monkey wrench in that. And as a result of being able to bring the truth out here, people aren't quite so gullible and just believing what the fake stream media is telling them anymore. So, yeah, it doesn't seem that we've, stopped the war efforts and got rid of all the Federal Reserve usury and all that stuff. But people are more aware than ever of all this stuff. And this is where we start. We have to recognize that we have a problem before we can find a way to come together and deal with it. This is going to be a long-term thing, and we're going to be at this for a while. And like Mike said, we're going to be at this as long as we can. But guys, step up. You need to be part of this as well. Get more shows. Talk to John. Maybe some of you guys want to get your own show here on the network or other places. Do your own podcasting, because it is so important to have our voices heard. As long as our voices are being heard, we still are in the fight and we still have a chance. If we don't start being active, we're going to lose this fight just because of inaction.
You're absolutely right here. And the fact is, right now, we are winning. We are winning the war for the minds of America. I think the lukewarm response to the Democrats' impeachment circus is one example of that. The failure of the global warming people to rally much support for their various plans is another. Your average media consumer, if you will, has grown skeptical. They've lost that naivete. They're ready to question everything they are being told by anybody out there, which includes us. You should question what we're saying as well. Okay, because we can make mistakes, we can be fooled, we can be fed false information by people who are trying to make us look bad. So again, as David said earlier on, you are your own best analysis. Use it. Use your own brain and think for yourself, and for the most part, you will be in the clear. Anything else, David?
No, that's about it. Like you said, you're your own best analyst, because that's the thing that's the biggest threat to the system is analytical thought. You guys engage in that, we've already won this. We just got to tie a bow around it. Aloha, nui nui, Mike. We'll catch you soon.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Steve. We're going to let you go. And one of the other advantages about getting everybody out there involved in writing their own podcasts, their own articles, and so forth, is that if there's only a handful of independent media, it's fairly easy for the powers that hope to get us all to shut down. But if there's 1,000 voices out there crying out the truth, that's a different proposition entirely. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here to Tony in Nebraska. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, nui nui.
Aloha.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing fine. What's on your mind?
What's going on with the Sackler family? The people that created the opioid crisis.
Okay, now you told our call screener you wanted to talk about the Second Amendment.
Oh yeah, definitely. Who's trying to take away the Second Amendment and who created the opioid crisis? The Sackler family. Aloha, nui nui.
Your voice is sounding very, very familiar here, and I think we've already had you on the show today in violation of our one caller per call per day, or whatever it is that we do here. So we're going to let you go, and we're going to go back to the phones here to Tricky in Winnipeg. Aloha, Tricky. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I just wanted to talk about the coronavirus.
Yes.
Okay. What seems a little strange, the doctor that was removed from the Winnipeg lab here, the level 4, was also the same doctor. She worked in Libya at the U.S. lab, And they had the two labs there. They had one that was affiliated with Bill Gates, and then they had the U.S. lab there. But she was going back and forth from Winnipeg to China into Wuhan, and she was working on their level 4 lab. I don't know whether there's any kind of a connection. It just seems a little bit strange.
Well, again, Wuhan is China's only known BSL-4 lab, and it is the center of this outbreak. So the idea is that somebody dropped a test tube out a window, either by accident or intentionally. As far as this link from this doctor in Winnipeg, we'd have to look at a timeline of exactly when she was there last relative to the start of the outbreak, which, again, they're now admitting that they had detectable cases back on December 1st.
Yeah, she was. I believe she was removed from the lab here last July, and as of October, still she wasn't there. And her husband and also some students, husband's a biologist, and he had some students there as well. They were all removed as well. So I don't really know.
When you say removed, where were they sent to?
That I don't know. They were escorted out of the lab, and they're not allowed back in, as far as I know, to this day.
Well, that's an interesting angle to pursue. Maybe they were sort of playing fast and loose with secret information. I can't imagine that everything that is known about these viruses is made public for the obvious reason. Nobody wants Wuhan version 2 cooked up in a garage somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, listen. All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Tricky, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here to Andy in Texas. Aloha, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hey, Mike. First off, it's great to hear you back. Caught your show yesterday as well, and you haven't skipped a beat. You're right back on it, and you sound fantastic. Anyway, I just want to let people know we need not worry. We're in this little circle here. The circle always ends where it started at, and that's what they keep doing with everything they're doing here. They keep scaring us into this, scaring us into that. I mean, if they decide to try to take our guns, and it sounds like Virginia's getting very close to doing that, and then these red flag laws running around the country, they're all trying to take that too and stuff. The American people are not going to stand for that. And what the American people need to realize is that we outnumber them at least 317 million to 10 million. I mean, what are they going to do? And I think the military is mostly on our side. So, I mean, we're all running around scared, knocking our knees. Every time they say something that's kind of scary to somebody, we start knocking our knees and getting very concerned. I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. This coronavirus is just, it's just on steroids. It's the, what's that other one that's familiar to it? Anyway, it's just on steroids, and they're trying to scare us and stuff. But we do have some key components in the opposition movement, if you will, or the alternative news networks that are trying to scare us a bit. I do admire Mike Adams, but he's coming out saying this is a bit overload here. It's a little different than they've seen before. So it does give me a little sense to worry and stuff. But up until we start seeing some real numbers showing up where they just can't deny it and stuff, I mean, everybody be careful for sure. But until we start seeing some real numbers that are adding up here to where people are really getting sick and it does seem like it's moving, I think we all just need to relax, do what we normally do, because anybody who listens to Mike Rivero or any of the alternative news, and I don't say alternative meaning we're all alternative, you guys are the news for a fact, because these guys on TV don't know what they're talking about. But anybody who does listen to it, we already know how to be prepared. And some of us have had to be prepared because, we've been living on the streets and whatnot. Having said that, I think most people need to sit back, relax a little bit, take all this in and realize that in the last few years, it's been the same stuff over and over again. The SARS, they were taking guns a while ago. They brought it up again. They did it again. I mean, they're moving closer and closer and closer, trying to push some buttons. Maybe they're trying to get a civil war. I don't know. Well, if they want one, it will happen because we're not going to take it. I mean, I think there's enough people now, more awake now than ever before, and you can see that in the homeless population. I can contest to that. They're ready to take up arms anytime Anytime you guys say go, let's do it. That's the way they're feeling, and I'm just like that too. You know, having been a veteran and whatnot, and having to do the things I had to do, I don't feel very proud of this government. In fact, I don't even recognize this government. I live for me and me only, up and into the point where I have somebody I feel or care about, then I'll take care of them as well. But having said that, I think people need to relax a little bit, certainly take in all the information that needs to be taken in, absorb it, but don't process it too far to the point where you're chewing your fingernails and worried about it. Don't you think that's about the right deal there, Mike?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and it's very, very good advice because, yes, you need to be informed, you need to know what's going on, but on the other hand, you need to compartmentalize as well. And I went through this exercise with Claire and with some of our more, shall I say, dedicated readers and listeners, where I say, look, it's good that you know all this stuff and everything, but you've got this lovely daughter and you've got this lovely wife, and you need to basically break off from some of this stuff and take some time to be with them. And that's the key to living a full life, is that you're doing all of the stuff in moderation. But there are, unfortunately, people who get totally caught up and buried, if you will, in all of the politics and the corruption that's going on, and it's a bad thing. It's bad health. So your advice is absolutely right. Be informed, but don't go crazy with it, because crazy is where, frankly, the government wants you to go with all this.
Exactly, and that's what I'm trying to impress to the people, is that we take this stuff in, we mow it over, and most of us, notice that we have a lot of the same callers calling in all the time, me being one as well, but we're all really, really concerned because each little piece of news that we get, we inhale it and we fail to exhale it. We inhale it and just keep it in there, and it stirs and stirs and stirs. I believe it's Kevin from West Virginia. He's called in worried a lot. He was worried about Monday with Virginia and stuff, and that's not the first time he's called in, and there's no offense to him. I mean, there's stuff to be worried about out there, but the simple fact is that whatever's going to be is going to be, but we have to be ready to react to it, not be scared for it to happen. We need to get ourselves ready, and that's all I got for you, Mike. You have a great day, and I'm glad you're healthy again, and you sound fabulous. Have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Well, I'm healthier. I'm not over this yet. It's going to take a while. My next goal is to get home, which is going to be in 1 or 2 weeks. After that, it may be a few months before I'm really back to normal. Anyway, we got to take another break for commercials. We have a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Tom in Utah. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It's good to have you back.
Thank you.
I've been freaking out, though, as I hear the garbage that's coming out on the media about the coronavirus. Back in '59 and in the '60s, I was working in veterinary pathology. We know that virus very well. It cycles back and forth through the environment. The primary host is the birds. It's an avian virus. It doesn't bother the birds. They just simply carry it. Periodically, it'll come out with a variation that is, virulent to man. The only way you can get that virus is to have an intimate contact with a bird. Now, the most intimate contact is when you're slaughtering, butchering, or preparing that bird for your table. That's when the virus has an opportunity to pass to man. It doesn't pass through the air. All the viruses and the bacteria that infect or bother man are both photophobic and
yes.
And they oxyphobic. In other words, they can't stand oxygen and they can't stand light or cosmic energy. So within 4 seconds in direct sunlight, every virus I ever labored on in my lab is destroyed by sunlight. And within half a dozen minutes, oxygen burns it out. So the only way you can receive a virus that causes illness in you is to have direct or intimate contact with the vector, with the host animal, or another individual. That means you have to have a very intimate contact. You can't get it through the air in an airplane. I'll ride any airplane anywhere. I'll go sit in the middle of this city in China and never worry. Because as long as I don't have an intimate tissue contact with that host, I will never get that virus. I'll get the dead organism. That'll also prepare my immune system for any small, contamination. But I cannot get the virus without literally wrapping my lips around it or ingesting it or injecting it or having it somehow enter my body under the protection of my skin, which is cholesterol. Cholesterol is a shield that protects those organisms from the cosmic energy and from sunlight and from oxygen. So the only way you can get the coronavirus is through consumption or the handling or processing of a bird or an animal who's had contact with that bird. That is the reality. Oh. And I go crazy listening
when you
to
say
crap.
When you say cosmic energy, you mean ultraviolet light, right?
Ultraviolet light and alpha, beta, gamma particles. They all over time destroy organisms that are subject to their power. You put a virus
that applies
on the
also
sidewalk,
to human beings as well.
You put a virus on the sidewalk in Los Angeles at noonday, and 4 seconds later, it is dead, deader than a doornail. 4 seconds to kill the virus on the sidewalk in direct sunlight. It'll take about 12 or more minutes to kill it with oxygen, but it'll be gone. If these viruses and bacteria had their way like you've been told, humanity would have been extinct millions of years ago. They blame air in an airplane or being in contact. In fact, in the hospital, I would go up and I would touch a patient, literally put my hands on their hand to check their pulse and their vitals, right? I would never worry about getting sick from them until I got the suture. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm 80, and I've been through hell. I testified in D.C. I was assaulted for that. But anyway, I would never worry about getting an infection from a patient until I opened them up and had their blood and tissues available to me directly. Touching them on the outside will not get you sick. Yeah. In the surgical theater, you wear the protection. Go ahead.
It's interesting that you would mention this because China has now shut down much of the trade in animals and animal components around Wuhan. And they're starting to narrow their focus down to one specific market that may have been the source of the contagion. Now, patient 0 had no association with the market that they're aware of, but of the remaining infected patients, 66% had visited that market. So they're starting to narrow down the vector.
It's in the flocks in that area. And the very first news reports were honest. They said it's in the animals and it's being found in the people. But as soon as that news report went out, you can believe the merchants of death had to shut it down because it interferes with profit. And by the way, a sick animal is an economic loss, but a sick human is an economic benefit. So they'll tell you the truth. They'll tell you the truth in veterinary science, but you'll never get the truth in human science. And I'm sorry to be that way, but I spent my life in that crossover veterinary pathology, human pathology, and today I just go bananas when I hear this bull crap, and all it does is supply and profit the pharmaceutical medical complex, which I got out of because I couldn't stand the fraud. And I've still been doing battle. I don't know if you've even looked at my website, Gassing America, and the other things I've been doing.
Oh, yes. Now I know who you are. Now I remember who you are.
Yes, and even Elaine Jarvik, the ex-wife of Robert Jarvik, she remembered and respected me. She wrote the article you can see from there called InTheAir.news. InTheAir.news. She knew who I was. She knew I was not a cuckoo, but everybody's tried to paint me as a cuckoo because it protects their profit. And as long as I can keep you ignorant, I can keep you dependent upon me for medical care, for pharmaceutical supply. And I just go cuckoo in this. I sit back and say, why don't people figure it out? It's not in the air. It's in the blood and tissues. And that is it. When you cross
Well, you're
that line,
absolutely correct.
see, Paul McCartney found out about me and had me come down and teach all of his friends, but the movie industry did not appreciate that because their big profit is off the products that come from the livestock industry. They want their stars to be vegetarians and vegans, but they don't want you to be because they'll lose out on that $10 can of buttered popcorn at the theater. When you find out that the film people, that the trade secret, you worked in film, you know this, the trade secret is to put the right thing in your body so you're camera ready and script ready. We'll let the attendees at the theater eat the garbage so we can collect their money and then make them clients of the doctors. Anyway, sorry to be a little bit...
Interestingly enough, what they put on the popcorn in movie theaters these days isn't even real butter anymore. It's this oil that's flavored to taste like butter, and that's all it really is. But it's not good for you. And
it has the chemicals.
It's all driven. It's all driven by profit.
Of dairy. Sorry about this.
So it's all driven. Yeah, it's a real headache. It's all driven by profit, people wanting to protect the profits. And again, having gone through the whole SARS and bird flu and swine flu and kung flu and all the rest of these, I am beginning to think
garbage. Yeah.
I think this is just more of the same.
Spanish flu. The Spanish flu didn't begin in Spain or Mexico or anywhere Spanish. It began right in Jackson County, Missouri.
Missouri, I thought it was Camp Funston.
That's where it ended up because they were shipping the pork from Jackson County to the military. Cohen, the veterinary doctor that day, tried to tell the industry, don't send your product to the military men fighting the war. They will end up with this infection. Well, they did it anyway. In fact, they readjusted his attitude with a baseball bat. They almost killed poor Dr. Cohen when he'd identified the source of the flu in the pigs, and they were shipping that product, the surviving pigs, to the military. Went overseas, it took down the military men in Europe as well. And then it spread from those dead bodies when the rats and the birds came and used the dead soldiers as carrion. So that's how it spread. And that was all published and well known in the Department of Agriculture. By the time I got into that science, I was there when Ezra Taft Benson was Secretary of Agriculture. We were going through the cattle herds, calling them for polio. It wasn't Sabin or Salk. It was Ezra Taft Benson that stopped polio in the United States. He had us take out any animal that showed high titer of bovine polio. But nobody's ever allowed to know that. So I sit here and I freak out. I'm 80, and I've been through hell, but I freak out because I worry about the children and people like you that are victims of this ignorance that is peddled by the medical pharmaceutical complex. Boy, am I getting myself in trouble now. But anyway, right now I'm still doing battle for my children, for your children, for you, trying to get you to see that you cannot handle an animal without protection. I mean, pet your dog, love your cat, but don't butcher them and then expect not to get the infections that they carry naturally. By the way, one more thing, Mike. The reason the animals don't go down with these diseases is because they run at a perpetual fever. Your dog runs from 103 to 105 degrees. Your cow runs from 101 to 103. Your chicken, your birds run at 107 to 118. But the prime temperature maturation of all these viruses and bacteria is 98.6. So who is their target?
Sounds like we are.
You're the only 98.6 degree animal on the planet. That is the prime temperature maturation of every virus, every bacteria, every parasite that I ever cultured or studied in my lab. So what kind of an animal are we? We're supposed to be an herbivore. I'm sorry to say that. That's what I told Paul McCartney. You can see me talking to his friends on my website if you ever have the time to look there. And Paul appreciated me because I let him know why Linda died. And he had me speaking to 2,500 of his friends there at Paramount Studio lot. After Linda had passed away, he had a gala. He invited me to the gala, and I spoke to them, and people like even Fran Drescher came up to me in D.C. and put her arms around me, gave me a big hug, thanking me for saving her breasts, her life, and her career. By the way, Jack O'Lane had me speak to all of his clients. Remember that Jack started to pedal along with Elaine.
I remember Jack.
Wonderful man, good-hearted. Even Jay Cordish, the juice man who lived down there in Pacific. Oh, I forget the community down there close to Pacific. Oh, no, Oceanside.
Yes.
Anyway, like I say, I am going nuts when I hear this nonsense about coronavirus, Mars, Zika virus. All of this is just crap. It's just to get you hyped up, get you to the doctor, get you into the pharmacy, and get your money, and still take your life. Sorry to be so.
Take your health.
Take your health. They don't want you to be healthy because you're dependent. As soon as you know the truth, you fix yourself. They can't profit off of your misery. There was a whole bunch of us that left. Whole bunch of us left medicine.
Go ahead.
I said there was a whole bunch of us that left medicine in the mid-'70s when we saw evidence-based medicine going into the toilet and it becoming just profiteering. And right now, our children are paying
in the 70s with Nixon passing the. Yeah, that's when Nixon signed the bill for the Health Maintenance Organizations Act, which he did as a repaying a campaign favor to his friends over at Kaiser Permanente, which is kind of an interesting story in and of themselves because Kaiser was originally an aluminum processing manufacturing company. They even made their own deep sea submersible called the Illuminaut, and eventually they went out of business. But they'd set up their own health maintenance organization for their employees that turned out to be a huge financial success, and that's where Kaiser Permanente came from.
Exactly. So you've been visited by the aluminum naughty.
Well, aluminum's kind of cool. I mean, you don't want it in your body, but it's kind of cool.
Well, anyway, Michael, I really am glad that you're back. And please, when you get a moment, go back to gassingamerica.com, link out to the other things that I've done that are still up. I've been struggling. I'm now $18,000 in debt on this case where I proved a man innocent. He was accused of arson. By the way, what's really curious, the Rand Corporation found me as a student in high school. I had an IQ pushing 200, so they recruited me and trained me in combustion dynamics, and that helped pay for my medical education. But at the same time, with that education, it now come to play with this case called Meadows Fire, where a man was accused of arson. And as soon as I heard the details, I was blinded in D.C., so as people described to me the details, I said, this is not arson, this is a stupid hospital fire. That was one of the things that they assigned me to as a specialist in combustion dynamics at the hospitals, because in the hospitals you have flammables, particularly alcohol.
Yes, you do. And oxygen.
And all it takes is a static spark to turn a patient into a torch. You had a nurse give you a bed bath with alcohol. She'll turn around, walk across the floor in her the hush puppy shoes. They'll generate static in her body. She'll come back and touch the patient. That alcohol will ignite. And one of the problems with alcohol It burns with a non-luminescent flame. You can't see it initially until it starts to cause something else to burn.
Yes.
So you'll have a patient that'll be screaming with the heat, and you'll turn around and say, what's wrong with that patient? But I teach the nurses and doctors, throw a blanket over him, there is a fire. Anyway, better let you go to break.
All right, well, listen, Tom, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call. Very informative, and I do appreciate it, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're getting an update on the Kobe Bryant helicopter crash. And apparently investigators and the coroner's office have found and removed 9 bodies from the wreckage of the helicopter. So that's how many people went down. Whether that was 7 passengers and a pilot and co-pilot, we don't know. We don't even know if there was a co-pilot, but that's the latest development there. Okay, so let's talk about the impeachment circus. And again, I wish I had my calliope music here I could play. And let's see. Basically, President Trump's team took the Senate floor again today to basically mount their rebuttal to the Democrats' impeachment charges. They started getting into the recent Bolton accusations, which really, again, all Bolton did was he wrote a book. Coming from a position of non-objectivity, was very biased against the president for firing him. Began writing this book apparently right after he was fired. So possibility that this is a vindictive act of revenge cannot be discarded. And he's made some allegations in there, some of which were excerpted and published by the New York Times, which has led to the Democrats' call saying, we have to have witnesses. We have to have more witnesses. Anyway, let's go back to the phones here. Alan in North Dakota. Aloha, Alan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. Nice to have you back. That was an excellent call from Tom in Utah, which reminded me of a couple of quotes, and I will recite them to you. They were very brief. One is from Ernest Hemingway, and he said that the truth has a certain sound to it. And in the words of John Adams, facts are stubborn, real stubborn.
Yes.
With that, I'll let you go.
Well, thank you very much for those quotes. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Take care, Michael. Bye-bye.
I will. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. All right. So we're talking now about the impeachment here. And Alan Dershowitz basically came on out saying that even if one stipulates that Bolton's revelations or accusations are correct and accurate, there's nothing that comes up to the level of an impeachable offense. And again, they're talking about this idea that Trump may have done some things that were a little less than wonderfully ethical. Do they rise to the level of a high crime or misdemeanor? And the answer, of course, continues to be no, he didn't. And there are no witnesses to say that he did. So now Pelosi has come out with a very, very strange statement warning Republican senators that if they do not go along with calling more witnesses for the Democrats, they will, quote, pay a price. Now, that to me sounds like a threat. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And, you know, everybody's, you know, I guess it's like football. Everybody joins up on one team or the other. Apparently, former Chief of Staff John Kelly is out there saying, I believe John Bolton. I absolutely believe John Bolton. And, of course, meanwhile, you've got Bob Driscoll, who's the attorney for acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, released a statement moments ago denying the accusations alleged by Bolton. Now, Bolton has always been a loose cannon. He wants to wage war on everybody that he thinks is his enemy. And so they're going at it tooth and nail, and I'm not sure what the Democrats are hoping to achieve. At this point, They can drag this out. They can continue to play it as a circus. They're not going to get Trump out of office. It's simply not going to happen. They don't have the votes. Unless they've got unless Jeff Epstein has got had video on some of those GOP senators, it's not going to happen. So Alan Dershowitz got out there and he mounted his own version of the defense against the impeachment trials, basically talking about, where's the bar? Where's the threshold for all of this? And basically warning that the Democrats' lawless view of impeachment would place Congress above the Constitution. And Dershowitz, as much as I hate to admit it, I agree with him on this one point. I don't like Dershowitz. He and I have clashed before. But in this case, he's absolutely right. The whole idea of the separation of powers is to have separate but equal branches of government keeping an eye on each other. But if Congress is able to simply impeach anybody they want, basically at a whim, then Congress is now running the country. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Congress is supposed to make the laws. The executive branch enforces the laws. The judiciary decides if the laws are constitutional or not. All righty. Now, Ted Cruz, boy, it's amazing. I wish he'd looked this good back when he was running in 2016. But I don't know if it's the beard or he's just matured. But he had a really good interaction today when he was giving a media briefing about the impeachment. And Cruz was criticizing Democrats for arguing that President Trump sought to investigate corruption in Ukraine in order to damage his political opponent. And we've just seen 2 hours of evidence, and at a minimum, it was not only reasonably justified, but the president had an obligation to investigate corruption that extended to the very highest levels of the government. Now, a reporter came on in basically with this bizarre comment saying that, excuse me, I'm having a little trouble with this portable computer. The reporter interrupted, Hunter Biden got a job. His dad was vice president. If that is a crime, shouldn't half your children be in prison? And Ted Cruz came on back and said, my children are 9 and 11, so I'm sorry you want to throw a 9-year-old in prison. And of course, that drew some laughter. At this point, my third grader plays basketball and softball at her school, so stop the nasty Washington game. And at that point, the reporter should have shut up, but he refused. He said, I'm sorry, it's not a nasty Washington game. And Cruz came back attacking a 9-year-old. Now, here is where I'm in agreement with Ted Cruz. Okay, the children are off limits if they're not actually involved in whatever we're talking about. In the case of Hunter Biden, he was involved. He was involved in Burisma. He made a lot of money. But when you're talking about 8 and 9-year-old kids, or you're talking about Barron Trump, they're off limits. Even the mafia has a rule saying the family is off limits. Business says that, Party A is going after Party B, and, the capo di tutti capi wants to go after the Godfather, and so forth and so on. But the families are left alone. In fact, very often they're taken care of. Now, I'm not involved with the mafia or anything, but that's one of the parts of the mafia that I actually like and respect and admire. The love of family, the protection of the family. And we have seen lately in our corporate media, they go after the kids of everybody. Not just Barron Trump, not just Ted Cruz's kids, everybody. A way of trying to hurt their opponents. Our corporate media has now sunk lower than organized crime here. Meanwhile, getting on back to Hunter Biden, after claiming he was broke in court when he was negotiating a settlement with stripper London Roberts, apparently he was spotted out in Los Angeles in a brand new Porsche, having reached a settlement with the stripper, London Roberts. So from somewhere, he seemed to get a little bit of money. You don't just go out and buy a Porsche. Otherwise, I would. I've driven Porsches before. I love them. I think they're great here. Anyway, Pam Bondi came on out with a program exposing the entire Burisma Biden situation, and ABC, CBS, and NBC refused to broadcast this expose of the Burisma scandal. So there is a scandal there. And that's the interesting part, to see the Democrats try and come out with this idea about, well, maybe there was some scandal there. Maybe Biden was doing something, but it's completely irrelevant to Donald Trump asking Putin to look into Biden. Of course, it's not irrelevant. It cuts right to the heart of the matter. It cuts right to the heart of the matter. Okay. Now, here's a really good one. Gentleman by the name of Joe Lockhart works for CNN, and he went on out and tweeted out a conversation between two Republicans. And the tweet went, "Overheard convo between two Republican senators who only watch Fox News. Is this real stuff? I've never heard any of this before. I thought it was all about a server. If half the stuff Schiff is saying is true, we're up blank creek. I hope that the White House has exculpatory evidence." Well, a lot of people called him on it, saying this is very comic book kind of dialogue. And finally, he admitted, yeah, he just made the whole thing up. CNN's Joe Lockhart just made this conversation up out of thin air, posted it to Twitter as news, relying on his name and CNN credentials to carry it. But, you know, he's come on out. Rather than apologize, he said it was okay for him to do this because, you know, that's exactly what they're thinking. So now Joe over there at CNN is a mind reader. He's a telepath. Amazing here. All right, remember Seth Rich? Seth Rich was this technician who was working for the Hillary Clinton campaign, working on her email server. And it has been reported through multiple sources that Seth Rich was the leak that leaked all those DNC emails to WikiLeaks, thereby exonerating Russia, for which was probably the motive for his being murdered. Police called it a botched robbery. Yeah, I'd say it was botched. They shot him like twice and then left his wallet, his cell phone, his watch. Apparently he was wearing a gold chain that was untouched. They didn't take anything. They just shot him down in the street and left. So the FBI claimed that Seth Rich's DNC computer and emails were investigated on his death, but then the FBI backtracked and said that there was no related documents when given a Freedom of Information Act request, saying, no, there was no investigation. We don't have any of the information. Unfortunately, it's now turned up again. So we caught the FBI basically in two lies, one right after the other. My goodness. J. Edgar Hoover would be so proud. Apparently over at the NSA, they're refusing to release any documents they have about Seth Rich because it's a matter of national security. It's tantamount to admitting that, yes, Seth Rich was at the heart of that flow of information from the DNC computers to WikiLeaks. Well, Ilhan Omar is back in trouble again. Apparently, there is now an active investigation as to whether she married her own brother in an immigration scam. Basically, she's being investigated by the FBI for marrying her brother in order to make him a citizen. Now, she's denied the allegations, but they have not gone away. So, if she's running again, by the way. So if the re-election works out for her, she's going to have 2 more years in Congress, and if it doesn't, she may be looking at 5 years in prison for immigration fraud. Getting on back to Jeffrey Epstein's adventures, if you will, lawyers for Epstein is ramping up pressure on Prince Andrew, basically saying that if he ever sets foot in the United States again, he will be hit with subpoenas. So it looks like the prince can't come to the United States anymore unless he decides to cooperate. But the fact that he went on TV and said, I promise I'll cooperate, and has done absolutely nothing of the kind, that's like a flashing neon sign on the forehead saying guilty, 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 guilty. Now, this leads us to this article that came on out from Government Slaves. basically speculating that pedophiles, child abusers, are actively searched out and put into positions of power so that they can be controlled. It's a guaranteed control mechanism. And this is being done with help from intelligence agencies, CIA, FBI, military intelligence, all of which are filled with their own pedophile problem. And they've completed this complete matrix of power and control. It's a big secret club. That's why we keep hearing so much about child molestation and abuse, and yet nothing ever gets done about it. And there have been case studies about how this is being done. There was the Dutroux affair, where an elite pedophile ring was uncovered, but then immediately recovered up by police and judges. Then you had one of the most infamous here in the United States, which was the Franklin scandal, which uncovered a child trafficking ring that went all the way to the White House. So maybe it's a rite of passage. Maybe these are people who under normal circumstances wouldn't dare assault a small child, but they're being told, look, you have to do this. It's a rite of passage. You have to molest that child. We have to have it on video. Then we know we can trust you and allow you to move higher up in the government. So anyway, Donald Trump is in New Jersey, just a little bit over that away. And apparently more than 175,000 tickets were requested to see him in Wildwood, New Jersey tonight. Obviously, they can't fit that many people into the venue. They were lined up before sunrise to see him. So whatever the Democrats were hoping to do in terms of Trump's base with all this impeachment nonsense, if anything, they've made him appear stronger by making him appear to be a victim. All right, let's talk about that airplane that was shot down over, no, wait, we've got a phone call here. So let's go to Joe in Nome. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I want to respond to the caller in the first hour that was talking about donating blood, and he was turned down because of his service in Germany.
Yes.
I think he brought up the chronic wasting disease or Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease as far as that malformed prion. In the wild, it's called chronic wasting disease. But
yes.
Yeah, they got a. I had a cousin that served in Germany, and he was drummed out with no benefits. But what they had him doing was cleaning out burned out tank. Well, one of the things, that was full of depleted uranium munitions.
Ouch.
And that right there, well, they didn't give him any, safety equipment or, radiation equipment or anything like that. And they didn't give him any benefits after he was discharged either. But that's exactly the profile that you would find. I would think that they flagged that fella for donating blood right away because of a situation like that many other veterans are also subject to. And I would think that Creutzfeldt-Jakob might be underreported problem there with those vets. At any rate, but
could very well be. I mean, I can, from the government's point of view, the reason they would want to separate somebody without any benefits or connections, depleted uranium, I mean, that's an engraved invitation to lung cancer and various other problems. As far as the blood screening itself is concerned, I used to donate blood on a regular basis until an unfortunate incident which kind of turned me off for the whole process. I even got to donate blood one time on the set of MASH at 20th Century Fox, which was kind of weird to be, lying on the table in that tent, with Alan Alda and the rest of them around there cheering us on, although they weren't drawing the blood. They had a proper Red Cross staff there. But they are very, very touchy about who they allow to donate blood. And as a matter of fact, I have been turned away just for running a small fever. So, they are they're, especially after that whole tainted blood scandal that came out of Arkansas, they're really trying to be careful about where the blood is being sourced.
Oh, I didn't catch that. But yeah, I figured that fella was automatically screened. My brother gave blood, and he ended up with neurological problems from the toxics involved with scrapping industry.
Yes.
And he gave blood for a long time. But yeah, it's heavy metals. He wasn't flagged because he wasn't in the service, right? And apparently they were testing it all that closely because he had plenty of it. Anyway, that was a few things that went through my head when he called in. But yeah, this is a problem all over, and it's going to be increasing because of Fukushima, because it's heavy metal poisoning.
Oh yeah, Fukushima. That's in one way, one of the reasons I'm glad that Claire and I are off of Hawaii and here in the middle of the heartland. We're still having to deal with effluents from the Deepwater Horizon and core exit still blow northward off the Gulf up this way. But at least we're away from the Pacific waters and Fukushima radiation.
Yeah, well, in Nome, we get a blast every now and then, and the climate's sending a lot more of that warm air up this way. Although today it's minus 12. But you have a nice day. I hope you feel better.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to go back to the phones. We're going to start with Francis in North Carolina. But Francis, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Well, hello, young man. Hats off to both Claire and you, for that matter. And when you're talking about what the government officials are willing to do to a politician to frame them in place and keep them in so-called control or whatever, you remind me of a film. You remind me of a film back in the 90s, I think it was, with Eddie Murphy, mainly, called Distinguished Gentleman.
Yes.
Which was a very humorous film that looked at what actually goes on in D.C., but it was mild compared to what goes on in D.C. now, or I should say the District of Criminals currently. So,
yes,
if someone would look at that, it's like, oh, well, that's what's really going on, no big deal. Hey, it's 100 times, if not 1,000 times worse than that film, what is going on. So, anyway, have a great one. Later.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Cody in Illinois. Aloha, Cody. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I'm so glad that you're back and doing well.
Thank you.
See, you had your fill-in guy here a few weeks ago. What was his name?
Ryan Dawson.
Ryan Dawson, okay. And he was talking about, I just read this article, 34 soldiers suffered traumatic brain injury in the Iran attack. And I understand we lost a lot of helicopters over there. I just think it's interesting. It's kind of been covered up in the media. What do you know about that and why the Patriot missiles or what other defense, just all the money we spend on defense, it's embarrassing to me that we weren't able to protect ourselves better. I'm curious on what you understand about that.
Well, we have to understand, first of all, what was already in position. And the U.S. has already stated they're sending more defensive systems to protect the green zone. and they're demanding that the government in Baghdad also step up protection of the green zone. So it may have been a case of simply not being prepared for all the talk about the danger that Iran is and their ballistic missiles and this and that. It looks to me like the U.S. military was caught more or less with their pants down. If in fact there were Patriot batteries or even THAAD at the location and they failed to deal with the incoming threat, then yeah, that's a huge, huge embarrassment. But lately we've seen our military industrial complex, for all the expense these weapons cost, for the high prices on them, they don't perform very well. We've seen that with the F-22, the F-35, the Gerald R. Ford, the Zumwalt, and on and on and on and on and on and on. And one of the reasons I think they're being... Go ahead.
Well, sorry, that's what Ryan had mentioned. And that's just, it's just so unacceptable. All the money we spend, and it's not like we don't have engineers. I just don't understand. It's now you're hearing that some of these, I think Ryan made the comment, some of these Russian systems are actually doing better than it's just unbelievable to me. And so Trump kills a few guys there in Iran, and now we have all these soldiers now. They're going to have lifelong, defects, from this. It's just, we need to jealously guard our young men. It's just so unacceptable all of our United States needs to be smarter about this. We need to stop and just refuse to be, the forefathers warned us about foreign entanglements. And we don't need the oil anymore in these countries. And, I could use some good men working for me. And, we got a big problem. We got the highest prison population in the world. And now we got so many men distracted in foreign entanglements. And then we wonder why the society is breaking down. It's just, I want people to think about that and, try to educate their young men to maybe not go in the military, stop supporting this, join a militia, stop supporting this adventurism. It's just sad. And, I thank you for, on that there. I just didn't understand why we're spending all these billions and trillions of dollars and then we don't have a system that can protect the base. Just pretty unacceptable and embarrassing. So anyway, thank you, Mike.
It is embarrassing. And I'm in agreement with you that we should be cherishing our young people, especially in uniform, but we aren't. They're considered expendable. They're considered just more of the materiel to be thrown into these various wars and conflicts. And as long as we have more and more of them, the wars will continue. And I think one of the reasons for the open borders agenda is to try and load up the population of the United States with young men of military age that can be conscripted and thrown into battle. The problem with that, and they've already discovered problems with this theory, is that these illegal immigrants or even legal immigrants, they don't have a real strong emotional connection to the United States of America. And so when it comes to actually putting their lives on the line for the country, the motivation isn't there. So they did actually form one unit out of illegal immigrants who wanted a green card, but they performed very, very poorly. All right, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Nope, I'm a minute early. All right, so let's get on back to that airplane that was shot down over Taliban territory. And it turns out that it was called an E-11A communications aircraft. It's from the 43rd Expeditionary Electronic Combat Squadron, and apparently got shot down. The downed plane was the mobile command post for CIA's Michael D. Andrea, head of operations against Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. And it is America's most advanced spy platform. And now all the equipment and documents are in Taliban hands. And yes, I know the Taliban allowed the Americans through to the aircraft, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the Taliban turned everything over. So Russian intelligence sources confirm it has been reported that Michael de Andrea was responsible for the assassination of Major General Osam Soleimani. All right, there's the music. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones to Kelly in Austin. Aloha, Kelly. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. It's good to hear you back on the air. I've been trying to avoid these impeachment hearings as much as I can. I generally just hold Congress in the lowest esteem possible, specifically the Democratic side of Congress. And as I've watched bits and pieces of this hearing in the Senate, I'm just shocked at how shamefully the Democrats are behaving during the breaks. They run, they bloviating morons run to the press, and they make the most outlandish statements possible about what was said by the lawyers representing the president in the hearings, and they bear no resemblance to what I hear at all. I was under the impression
that's the whole point of that.
Yes, I understand. I thought that there was some limitation on the ability of members of Congress to communicate with the press during breaks in order to keep them from trying to influence public opinion one way or the other. I thought I remembered hearing at the beginning of the press that was wrong.
That's been thrown out the window. That's obviously been thrown out the window.
Well, certainly, because we know the Democrats will do what they want to do, and they'll get away with it. I'm surprised, having heard Nancy Pelosi's comments to threat to the Republicans, that she isn't actually called before Congress for censure somehow. Now, the House of Representatives will certainly not do that because she's a fellow Democrat. But I wonder whether or not
Speaker.
But I wonder whether or not the Chief Justice of the United States might not have something to say about that. That's a blatant attempt to intimidate Republicans into doing what she wants them to do.
Yes.
Ultimately,
yes.
I think this thing is going to blow up on Democrats, and the Trump will be in office, and I think he'll probably be reelected in 2020, and this will make they'll set their hair on fire for another 4 years. I also think that this is going to backfire on people like Mitt Romney, who seems to be unable to separate his personal feelings about Donald Trump from what he's actually there to do as a member of the Senate, hearing this case. I really think that he's so full of hatred for Trump that he would side with the Democrats in any way possible in order to put a knife in Trump's back. Trump hasn't been the most perfect president ever, but I look at where we are now compared to what the hell we would have been, the mess we'd be in if Hillary Clinton had been elected. And frankly, I just thank God that we have him right now instead of any of the other alternatives, or instead of any of the Democrats who are running for the nomination of in the Democratic Party right now. This country is really suffering from a lack of good leadership in Congress.
Agreed.
And the only way we can, and I think we really the remedy to that is just a clean house. All of those people have got to go. All of them have got to go. There are very few of them up there actually have proved their worth. Ted Cruz, I think, is one who's come a long way, and I'm beginning to look a lot more favorably upon Ted Cruz than I had before. And there are a couple of others, but in that whole mess on the Democrat side, that's just a loathsome, just a loathsome bunch of America-hating communists. I have no other way to put it. And out of that bunch, that Adam Schiff and his fellow Jew, that fat Gerald Nadler, and then also in the Senate, Schumer. What you have is a Jew-driven coup here. And if that in itself isn't enough to wake people up, I don't know what the hell it is. We have a problem in this country with politicians, and we have a special problem with a certain minority group in this country who are wielding far more influence in the House and in the Senate than they should. Well, I've got that off my chest.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. What can I tell you? You're absolutely right.
I'm really glad you're back. Please.
I was going to say, I don't think this government can be saved from within. It is going to have to be allowed to collapse, and we're going to have to rebuild a whole new system from outside. And again, I would say let's start with the Constitution and the first 13 amendments. We might want to rethink the Electoral College. We might not. I mean, there's arguments on both sides of that. But what we have to do is to reassert the safety mechanisms that this country originally had to guard against unwarranted influence by foreign powers, by large corporations, by the ultra wealthy. This nation started with all kinds of mechanisms to prevent that from happening, so that the people who were actually in the government were focused on the needs of the people rather than enriching themselves and enriching their donors. But over the last several decades, I've watched as bit by bit all those little safety devices were voted out of existence, and nobody really complained about it till we have what we have today, which is an oligarchy. You know, the ultra rich buying a government that serves the ultra rich.
And that, and also, this country is seeing an inexorable leftward drift, especially since the 1960s. And with that leftward drift, you've seen an erosion of institutions of government that actually worked for a long time, such as the Electoral College. All these things are under attack now. They're under attack because one political party in particular aims to exert absolute control over all aspects of political life in this country. That ought to scare people.
Not just political life. Ultimately, liberalism is about controlling all aspects of all lives.
Well, in that case, I think it's difficult to separate all aspects of life from politics, because when politics becomes all-encompassing and oppressive, politics becomes the problem.
Yes.
Anyway, Mike, I'm really glad
does.
to have you back. Yeah, I'm really glad to have you back, and I know that many others are as well. So take care of yourself, and don't end up in the hospital again, please.
Well, I'm going to try, but again, I'm 67 years old, and you know, in this case, I'm dealing with something which they think is caused by a virus. They don't actually really know. Apparently, not enough people get this to where there's any kind of money devoted to researching either the cause or a cure. So, but they have something that appears to work and drive it back, and so I'm going to be on those for the rest of my life. Anyway, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the news here, we were talking about this E-11A communications jet. And as one of our callers earlier pointed out, the official story keeps changing. At first they said there were less than 10 people on board. Then they said less than 5. Then they said only 2. Of course, a U.S. official earlier confirmed they've recovered the bodies of 2 Americans from the crash site, but that may not have been everybody who was on the aircraft. The Taliban claims the E-11A communication satellite contained high-ranking officers when it was shot down. So, on that one. All righty, there was another rocket attack on Baghdad, on the embassy, and this was on Sunday. And apparently Mike Pompeo is blaming it all on Iran, but Iran is denying it, and there is no evidence one way or the other. So, given the surprising accuracy of the missiles that hit that embassy, would have been something. I mean, they want to start a war with Iran any way that they can. We've seen that for week after week, month after month, year after year. Iran. Remember Senator John McCain? He danced around the stage going, bomb, 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 Iran, bomb, bomb, bomb. And just think that was funny as all get out. I mean, you're talking about people, human beings, just like us, fathers, mothers, children, at the receiving end of those bombs. And McCain thinks it's a big joke. Anyway, the United States has stopped all weapon deliveries to Iraq security forces amid rising tensions following the drone assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad. Apparently, they bagged him inside Iraq. So the Iraqis and the Iranians are getting together and talking, and apparently somebody somewhere doesn't like it. And so now the U.S. is no longer sending weapons to Iraq. I would not be at all surprised if we saw several Middle Eastern countries, Iraq, Iran, UAE, whoever, just all of a sudden gang together and tell the United States, get out. It's time to get out. Huge protests outside the green zone. Yankee, go home. No more occupation. Sovereignty now. Freedom now. Anyway, all right, let's see. Over at the Iranian Republican Guard Corps, their chief commander of the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps says none of the American military commanders can be safe in any part of the world if the U.S. administration continues to threaten the Iranian commanders. So the war of words is heating up, basically saying, you target our people, we're going to target your people. That will be the end of it. All right, well, Trump had a meeting with Netanyahu today in a press conference, and just a few hours before the press conference, Netanyahu was formally indicted for corruption back in his home country of Israel. And I have to wonder at the timing if maybe the announcement was made by somebody who doesn't like Netanyahu or maybe favors Benny Gantz for the upcoming elections. But he has now been indicted. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. And the upshot of it is they released finally Trump's deal of the century. Now, they didn't actually call it that because that term has become kind of tainted with earlier leaks and revelations. But as expected, this was heavily biased in favor of Israel, which basically said, we promise that somewhere down the road, there'll be a two-state solution, that Palestine will have a capital somewhere in the suburbs of Jerusalem, although Jerusalem will remain an undivided city. Trump is promising a settlement freeze, which is kind of a little late because Israel has been putting up settlements all over the place. And they're talking about maybe a return of some land to Palestine, which again, it's part of this scam. Israel has swiped about 70, 80% of the West Bank with their settlements. Now they're going to give back 10%. So needless to say, Trump yesterday said the Palestinians probably won't like it, and he was absolutely right. The leaders of Palestine, Hamas, and Hezbollah are all saying this thing is dead on the arrival. Dead on arrival, it's a non-starter. Because again, the payoff for Palestine is somewhere down the road once they have stopped all acts of terrorism. And all Israel has to do is fake more acts of terrorism to keep the rest of the deal from being implemented. Just a horrible, horrible situation. Okay, now 6 years ago, our media just lit up with this story from the South Korean newspaper Chosun Ilbo about how Kim Jong-un had murdered his aunt. And the Chosun Ilbo was held up as a, accurate source, a reliable source, and the American media went with this Kim Jong-un has murdered his aunt to consolidate his power, or whatever reason was given. Well, first of all, Chosun Ilbo has a long history of printing lurid fake news, and as it turns out, the aunt has turned up alive after 6 years. So I have to think of some new slogans and mottos for the corporate media, like truth, that's the other guy's product. All right, let's talk about the economic news. It's not particularly good. More and more forecasts that sooner or later there has to be a correction. Charles, let me get this out here. Charles Nenner is out there saying that if we have a major correction, gold could hit $60,000 per ounce. That's a real shame here because I don't have any gold. Fortunately, I've somehow managed to misplace my wedding ring too. Gee, I wonder what I'm getting for Valentine's Day. Anyway, $60,000 per ounce. So far, over 1,200 store closings has been announced for 2020. And this is coming from Payments, which is a payment processing system for retailers. Let's just go on down here. Yahoo Finance is out there saying exactly the same thing. We're looking at Macy's, JCPenney, Papyrus Express, and Pier 1 Imports have reported 1,218 closings this year already, and we're just coming up on the first part of February. Now, last year, 9,200 stores closed, including Payless Shoe Source, Fred's, Gymboree, and Charlotte Russe. There were widespread closures by Family Dollar, Forever 21, Charming Charlie, Sears, Kmart, AC Moore, and GameStop. This will be the fourth year in a row that retailers will shutter 100 million square feet of space, which equals about 562 Walmart supercenters. So tell me again how the economy is doing wonderful. Doesn't look like it from here. Doesn't look like it from here at all. Okay, Mexico is starting to tackle its own illegal immigration problem, which are these caravans of thousands of migrants from Guatemala, El Salvador, and elsewhere, cracking down on border crossers at its own southern border. And now critics are convinced that Donald Trump, unable to get a physical border wall built, has convinced Mexico's president to come to his de facto, to come and be his de facto border patrol. Well, at least something is getting done. I mean, that's the important part. At least something's being done. Now, down in Texas, there's this new Texas-based construction company, Speed Fab Concrete, and apparently they got caught hiring illegal immigrants. Ooh, shame on you, shame on you, shame on you. And the company is going to be paying millions of dollars in fines for hiring illegal aliens and then covering it all up. And its owners may actually be sent to jail. Well, again, about time. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we've got an update on that story about the missile attack that happened earlier this month. They have now raised the number of victims with traumatic brain injuries from 37 to 50. So it's now 50. And like most accountants, I don't trust numbers that have fives and zeros in them. So it probably means a lot more people were hurt. And that previous caller raised a good question. Where was the air defense system when these ballistic missiles came on in? And if it was simply not there, well, that's a court-martial offense for negligence, if you will. If they were there and simply did not work, that is a huge embarrassment to the military-industrial complex. All right, getting on back to immigration here. Apparently, illegal immigration has dropped 90% at the Arizona border because of the sections of fence that have been so far completed there, but at least it's going down. Now, here is a very, very bizarre story. Okay. Over in Poland, at Birkenau, 4 U.S. rabbis, led by New York's Avi Weiss, gathered at the Nazi death camp, Auschwitz, arguing for the removal of a church. There's apparently a church on the grounds, and of course, this sort of cuts into the official story about how this was targeting only Jews in those labor camps. So they want the church removed. Rather little interesting thing here. All righty, over in France, the fighting continues between firefighters and police. And I'm talking about the fighting is between the firefighters and the police. It's got nothing to do with the yellow vests, although I'm sure probably some of them are getting involved here. But apparently the firefighters have gone on a riot demanding better pay and working conditions. Oh boy, it didn't take long to wreck that wonderful country, did it? Liberals get in there. Okay, over this last weekend, we had the March for Life, which started on Friday. It's estimated at least 150,000 people showed up here. But one of the interesting demographic revelations was how the crowd is getting younger and younger. More young people, the youth movement is starting to come in on the March for Life. They're being convinced that abortions are not necessarily the end-all, be-all of a happy life. And good for them. good for them, first of all, that they are getting active, getting out there, and getting their message out there. And of course, as longtime listeners know, abortion is a very, very touchy issue. I'm opposed to abortion on demand as retroactive birth control. I recognize there are certain medical circumstances where it's necessary, but not really. I'm not a big fan of it, shall we say. Okay, we're almost to the end of the program. In the next article, I'm going to have to hold it over until tomorrow. It's kind of a detail regarding 3D firearms, ghost guns, and so forth. So there's the music. It's time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. And please spread the word about RBN. Spread the word about whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. And please start thinking about doing your own podcast, being a Rivero's Ranger, and starting to spread the word that way. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.